The obsidian amphitheater of the Galactic War Council stretched across dimensions, its crystalline walls reflecting the assembled forms of war deities from across the known universe. At the center of the vast chamber, a holographic display showed the smoldering remains of the Terran colony on Kepler 7, another human settlement reduced to ash by the advancing Zephyrian horde. Ares, god of war for the human coalition, stood before the cosmic tribunal with his shoulders squared and jaw set. His bronze armor caught the ethereal light streaming from the council's central nexus, but the usual fire in his eyes had dimmed to embers. Around him, the other war gods whispered in languages that predated stellar formation, their voices carrying the weight of eons and the authority of species that had conquered entire galactic arms. "Explain this failure, Ares of the humans," rumbled Thukmar, the six-armed deity who had guided the Centaurian Empire through 400 years of unbroken conquest. His voice resonated through the chamber like grinding tectonic plates. "Your species loses ground daily. Your warriors retreat when victory demands advance. Your commanders spare enemies who would show them no mercy." Ares lifted his chin, meeting the alien god's multifaceted gaze. "My humans fight with honor. They protect civilians. They follow rules of engagement that preserve rules." The interruption came from Skatara, the serpentine war goddess of the Viper clans. Her scaled form coiled around her speaking platform as acidic laughter hissed from her throat. "Your precious rules are why the Zephyrians devour world after world while your forces waste time evacuating non-combatants." The council's attention focused on the tactical display, where recorded footage showed human marines forming protective barriers around fleeing colonists, instead of pursuing retreating enemy forces. General Marcus Kane, the coalition's finest strategist, had ordered the withdrawal to save 3,000 civilian lives. The enemy had regrouped and struck again within hours. "This is what your guidance produces," declared Morton, the crystalline entity that had shaped the Obsidian Syndicate into the galaxy's most feared military force. "Weakness disguised as virtue, compassion that enables defeat." Ares stepped forward, his voice carrying the authority of battles fought across millennia. "You mistake humanity's strength for weakness. My people don't fight to dominate, they fight to protect. That distinction makes them formidable in ways your species cannot comprehend." The chamber erupted in dismissive sounds that ranged from chittering to roars. Thukmar, as Six Arms, gestured toward the display, where human casualty reports scrolled in crimson text. "Formidable? Your coalition has lost 12 systems in as many months. Your protection leaves worlds uninhabitable. Your mercy grants enemies time to regroup and strike again." "Perhaps," Skatara's voice dripped with venom, "humanity requires a different kind of divine guidance. A deity who understands that war is not a game played with rules, but a force of nature that consumes everything in its path." The suggestion hung in the air like a death sentence. Ares felt the weight of cosmic judgment pressing down upon him. But he refused to bow. "My humans fight with both strength and soul. They will prevail because they remember why they fight. Strip away their compassion, and you strip away their humanity. Then let us see how far humanity's soul carries them," Thukmar pronounced, his voice echoing through dimensions. "The council will vote on your replacement, Ares. May your successor prove more practical." As the war gods began their deliberations, Ares watched the tactical display shift to show human forces across the galaxy. In the Outer Rim, Captain Lisa Park was leading a desperate defense of the agricultural world, Haven Prime. Despite being outnumbered 3-1, her troops had held their positions for 18 days, evacuating 9 million civilians to safety. Their sacrifice would be remembered in songs and stories. But songs didn't win wars. Every great journey starts with a few brave explorers. Sci-Fi stellar conflict is just beginning, and your support means everything. If you're hungry for HFY battles and tales of human valor against alien might, hit subscribe. It's free, and it helps us bring these frontlines to you. The vote was swift and merciless. By a margin of 17-3, the Galactic War Council stripped Ares of his divine mandate over human military forces. The god who had guided humanity through the colonial wars, the first contact conflicts, and the terraforming rebellions, was dismissed like a failed general. "Your replacement awaits," Thakmer announced as reality warped around the chamber's center. Vex, the destroyer of worlds, will assume command of human military forces immediately. The entity that materialized before them defied easy description. Vex appeared as a constantly shifting mass of shadows and flame, his form suggesting weapons of mass destruction and the screens of countless worlds. Where Ares embodied the noble art of war, Vex was war's most primal and destructive essence. I accept this mandate. Vex's voice carried the sound of dying stars. Under my guidance, humanity will learn that mercy is a luxury only the victorious can afford. I will teach them to fight not with honor, but with the single-minded brutality that conquers galaxies. Ares felt the cosmic bonds that connected him to human commanders severing one by one. Across the galaxy, generals and admirals would soon find their prayers unanswered, their divine inspiration replaced by something far darker. The god of war looked one final time at the tactical display, where human forces continued their hopeless but heroic struggle against impossible odds. You have made a grave mistake, he said quietly. Humanity's strength was never in their weapons or their tactics. It was in their refusal to become monsters, even when monsters surrounded them. But the Council had already moved on to other matters, other wars, other species whose deities required evaluation. Ares was escorted from the chamber, his connection to humanity severed, his divine purpose stripped away. Behind him, Vex began studying human military doctrines with the hungry intensity of a predator examining prey. The galaxy was about to learn what happened when humanity's greatest strength was mistaken for weakness, and what occurred when the species that refused to abandon their compassion was forced to fight without their chosen god. The war was far from over, and the greatest battles lay ahead. The first sign of change came during the Battle of Titan's Gate, where Admiral Sarah Webb commanded the last human stronghold in the Centauri system. For 3 days, her fleet had held the orbital platform against overwhelming Zephyrian forces. Following standard coalition doctrine, protect civilian transports, minimize collateral damage, and maintain defensive positions until reinforcements arrived. Then the voice came. It wasn't Ares speaking through the quantum prayer frequencies that connected human commanders to their divine guidance. This voice carried the weight of collapsing suns and the hunger of black holes consuming matter. Vex had arrived. Admiral Webb, the shadow flame entity, materialized on the command bridge, his presence causing temperature readings to fluctuate wildly. Your defensive posture is pathetic. The enemy shipping lanes pass through the Meridian Nebula undefended. Strike there. Cut off their supply lines. Sarah stared at the tactical display, where the nebula showed as a swirling mass of cosmic dust and gas. Sir, that route is used by civilian freighters from 6 different species. Our intelligence suggests over 40,000 non-combatants pass through daily. Acceptable losses. Vex's form shifted, revealing glimpses of weapons that could crack planetary cores. War is not won by counting the innocent. It is won by destroying the enemy's capacity to fight. The Admiral's bridge crew exchanged uncertain glances. For generations, human military doctrine had been built on the principle of proportional response and civilian protection. Ares had taught them that true victory came not from the destruction of enemies, but from the preservation of what made humanity worth defending. I cannot authorize attacks on civilian targets, Sarah said firmly. The Coalition Charter explicitly forbids. The Coalition Charter is why you are losing. Vex interrupted, his voice carrying the sound of screaming. Worlds. Your enemy shows no such restraint. They have glassed 12 human colonies while you debate ethics. I offer you victory, Admiral. Take it, or watch your species burn. Across the galaxy, similar scenes played out as Vex manifested before human commanders. General David Chun, defending the mining world of New Akron, was ordered to use chemical weapons against enemy-held cities where human prisoners were being kept. Commander Amy Rodriguez, leading the defense of the research station at Proxima Point, was told to sacrifice her entire garrison in a suicide attack that would take out a single enemy cruiser. The responses were uniformly negative. Human commanders, trained under Ares' guidance to balance tactical necessity with moral imperatives, refused to follow orders that violated their core principles. The divine connection that had once provided inspiration and strategic insight became a source of conflict and doubt. On the bridge of the carrier Indomitable, Captain Jack Morrison watched his tactical display with growing desperation. The Zephyrian forces had broken through the outer defense perimeter, and his fighter squadrons were taking heavy casualties. Standard doctrine called for a fighting withdrawal to preserve his ships and crew, but Vex demanded something else entirely. Captain Morrison, the war god's presence filled the bridge with shadows that moved independently of any light source. Your fighters are retreating. Order them to ram the enemy capital ships. 150 pilot deaths will prevent thousands of ground casualties. Those are my people. Morrison's voice was steady despite the cosmic presence bearing down on him. They're not ammunition to be expended. They are tools of war, Vex replied, his form revealing briefly the silhouette of a weapon that could shatter moons. Under my guidance, humanity will learn to use every tool at its disposal. Sentiment is a luxury you cannot afford. The captain's hand hovered over the command console. A single order would send his pilots into suicide runs that might break the enemy formation. It was tactically sound, militarily efficient, and everything that human warfare had evolved beyond. Negative, Morrison said. I'm ordering a tactical withdrawal. We'll regroup at the secondary defense line. The effect was immediate and catastrophic. Vex's divine guidance withdrew from Morrison's mind, leaving him with the sudden, terrifying realization that he was commanding a fleet battle without any supernatural insight or strategic inspiration. The tactical display became a maze of possibilities. Without the divine intuition that had guided human commanders for centuries, similar scenes played out across the galaxy as human officers found themselves cut off from divine guidance. The war god who was supposed to enhance their effectiveness instead became a source of paralysis and doubt. Vex's brutal efficiency clashed with human nature so fundamentally that the connection between deity and mortal broke down entirely. In the Outer Rim, General Lisa Park watched her defense of Haven Prime crumble as Vex demanded she abandon the civilian evacuation to pursue a retreating enemy force. When she refused, the divine connection severed, leaving her to coordinate the planet's defense with nothing but her own tactical knowledge and the skills of her officers. Status report, she called to her staff as explosions rocked the command. Bunker. Enemy forces are advancing on all fronts, reported Major Tom Walsh, his voice strained. Without divine guidance, our coordination is breaking down. Battalion commanders are requesting orders, but the tactical picture is fragmenting. Lisa studied the holographic battlefield display, watching red enemy icons advance while blue friendly units struggled to maintain coherent formations. For the first time in human military history, they were fighting a major engagement without the strategic insight of their war god. Then we do this the old-fashioned way, she said, her voice carrying across the command center. We rely on our training, our courage, and each other. Send word to all units. We hold this line not because a god commands it, but because it's the right thing to do. The message spread through human forces across the galaxy. Cut off from divine guidance, abandoned by their replacement war god, human commanders began to discover something unexpected. Without the constant divine input that had shaped their tactical thinking, they were forced to rely on their own ingenuity, their understanding of their troops, and the moral principles that had always defined human warfare. It was a revelation that would reshape the conflict entirely. Vex had intended to make humanity more ruthless, more efficient, more willing to sacrifice anything for victory. Instead, he had freed them to discover that their greatest strength had never been divine guidance at all. The war was about to take a turn that neither the dismissed Ares nor the newly appointed Vex could have predicted. From his exile in the dimensional void between realities, Ares watched humanity struggle with a mixture of pride and anguish. The Galactic War Council had stripped him of his divine mandate, but they could not sever the emotional bonds forged across millennia of shared battles. Every human death resonated through his consciousness, every tactical failure twisted, like a blade in his cosmic essence. The war god observed as human commanders across the galaxy found themselves cut off from divine guidance, forced to make decisions based solely on their own judgment and the principles he had instilled in them over centuries of conflict. What he saw both broke his heart and filled him with unexpected hope. On the industrial world of Forge Prime, Colonel Mike Stevens faced an impossible choice. The planet's massive manufacturing complexes produced the weapons and equipment that kept human forces supplied across 3 sectors. Zephyrian forces had surrounded the primary facility, where 8,000 civilian workers remained trapped alongside his garrison of 1,500 Marines. Vex's guidance had been clear: detonate the facility's fusion reactors, destroying the enemy force and denying them the industrial capacity. The civilian casualties were irrelevant compared to the strategic value of the installation. Stevens had refused, cutting himself off from divine guidance entirely. Now, as enemy forces prepared for their final assault, he gathered his officers in the facility's reinforced command center. "Options," he said simply, studying the tactical display where red enemy icons surrounded their position like a closing fist. "We could break out through the northern perimeter," suggested Major Elena Vasquez, pointing to a gap in the enemy lines. "Take the Marines and as many civilians as possible, maybe save half. Or we make our stand here," added Lieutenant Colonel Ray Thompson. "Use the facility's defensive systems to buy time. Maybe relief forces will arrive." Stevens looked at his officers, seeing the same doubt and determination that had characterized human military leadership for generations. Without divine guidance, they were forced to rely on their own moral compass and tactical training. The result was something uniquely human: a refusal to accept impossible choices. "Third option," Stevens said, his voice carrying the quiet authority of a man who had found his purpose. "We save everyone." The plan they developed would have been impossible under either Ares's cautious guidance or Vex's brutal efficiency. Stevens divided his forces into 3 groups: one to evacuate civilians through the abandoned mining tunnels beneath the facility, another to create a series of diversionary attacks that would spread enemy forces thin, and a third to hold the main facility and make the enemy believe the entire garrison was still defending it. It was tactically unsound, strategically risky, and morally necessary. It was also purely human. Similar innovations emerged across the galaxy as human commanders, freed from divine constraints, began developing new approaches to warfare. On the colony world of New Eden, Captain Ruth Martinez discovered that her cut-off forces could coordinate through the planet's civilian communication networks, using the very people they were protecting as an intelligence-gathering system that outperformed any military sensor array. In the Vega system, Commander Alex Turner found that his damaged fleet could achieve tactical surprise by hiding among civilian shipping lanes, using cargo vessels as mobile sensor platforms while protecting them from enemy attack. The enemy, trained to expect conventional military responses, was consistently caught off guard by tactics that prioritize civilian protection while achieving military objectives. The breakthrough came when General Sarah Chang, commanding the defense of the critical supply depot at Crossroads Station, made a discovery that would reshape human military doctrine. Cut off from divine guidance and facing overwhelming odds, she had ordered her forces to integrate completely with the civilian population they were protecting. "They're not just civilians," she explained to her staff as they watched enemy forces approach the station. "They're engineers, technicians, pilots, mechanics. They know this station better than we do. They have skills we need." The result was unprecedented in galactic warfare. Instead of evacuating civilians or using them as human shields, Chang's forces incorporated them into the defense. Civilian mechanics kept military equipment running beyond normal parameters. Station engineers modified defensive systems with innovations that military doctrine had never considered. Even children became part of the intelligence network, their innocent presence in areas where adult civilians might be questioned, providing crucial information about enemy movements. The Zephyrian forces, trained to fight conventional military opponents, found themselves facing something entirely new: a human society that had transformed itself into a military force without losing its essential humanity. Every attack was met not just by soldiers, but by an entire community that had chosen to fight for its survival. Watching from exile, Ares felt a surge of pride that transcended his divine nature. This was what he had always tried to teach humanity: that their greatest strength lay not in their weapons or their tactics, but in their refusal to sacrifice their compassion for tactical advantage. But he also sensed something else stirring in the cosmic dimensions. The Galactic War Council was growing concerned. Vex's brutal efficiency was supposed to make humanity more effective, not less. The constant tactical failures, the breakdown of divine guidance, the emergence of entirely new military doctrines, none of this had been anticipated. In the obsidian amphitheater of the War Council, Thickemer's 6 arms gestured angrily at the tactical displays. Explain this chaos, Vex. Human forces are becoming less predictable, not more efficient. The shadow flame entity that had replaced Ares writhed with frustration. They refused to follow optimal tactical doctrine. They prioritize civilian protection over military necessity. They have severed themselves from divine guidance entirely. Then connect to them, hissed Sitara, her serpentine form coiling around her platform. Force them to accept your guidance. I cannot, Vex admitted, his voice carrying the sound of dying stars. They have rejected the very concept of divine military leadership. They fight now according to principles that transcend tactical necessity. The admission sent ripples of concern through the assembled war gods. A species that could function militarily without divine guidance was unprecedented in galactic history. It suggested a level of moral and tactical independence that threatened the very foundations of cosmic warfare. From his exile, Ares began to understand what was happening. Humanity had not been weakened by the loss of divine guidance. They had been liberated by it. Free from the constraints of even benevolent divine oversight, they were discovering their own unique approach to warfare, one that combined tactical innovation with moral principle in ways that no other species had ever achieved. The war god, who had been dismissed for being too soft, began to smile. His species was about to teach the galaxy that compassion was not a weakness to be overcome, but a strength to be wielded. And the lesson was going to be delivered with the full force of human ingenuity unleashed. The invasion fleet that emerged from hyperspace above Earth's moon was unlike anything the galaxy had ever assembled. 1,600 capital ships from 43 different species, commanded by the most ruthless military minds the cosmos had produced, all united under a single purpose: the total annihilation of humanity. The Galactic War Council had reached a unanimous decision. A species that could function militarily without divine guidance posed a fundamental threat to the cosmic order. If humanity's example spread to other worlds, the entire system of divine warfare oversight would collapse. The solution was swift and merciless. Humanity would be exterminated as a cautionary tale. Admiral Sarah Webb, now commanding the hastily assembled Earth Defense Fleet from the bridge of the dreadnought Defiant, watched the enemy formation with a mixture of awe and determination. Her force consisted of 200 human vessels, outnumbered 8-1 by an enemy that included some of the most advanced military technology in the galaxy. Status report, she called to her bridge crew, maintaining the calm professionalism that had become a hallmark of human military leadership. Enemy fleet is maintaining standard attack formation, reported Commander Lisa Park, recently promoted after heroic defense of Haven Prime. They're broadcasting surrender terms on all frequencies. Sarah studied the tactical display, where the massive enemy formation hung in space like a cosmic storm waiting to break. The surrender terms were simple: total capitulation, the dismantling of all human military forces, and the supervised extinction of their species to prevent the spread of their dangerous independence. Response? Asked Captain Jack Morrison, his voice carrying the quiet defiance that had characterized human reactions to impossible odds. Signal the fleet, Sarah said, her words carrying across the command frequency to every human vessel in the system. Humanity does not surrender. We do not retreat. We do not abandon our principles, even in the face of annihilation. All ships prepare for battle. The enemy response was immediate and overwhelming. Weapons that could crack planetary cores opened fire simultaneously, creating a wall of destructive energy that should have vaporized the human fleet in seconds. But something unexpected happened. The human ships didn't engage in a conventional battle. Instead, they scattered into seemingly random patterns, weaving between the massive enemy vessels like insects harassing giants. Individual human captains, trained to operate without divine guidance, began implementing tactics that no central command could have coordinated. Captain Ruth Martinez, commanding the destroyer Phoenix, dove her ship directly into the exhaust plume of a Centaurian battlecruiser, using the enemy's own drive emissions to mask her approach. Her crew, working with the desperate efficiency of people who had learned to rely on each other rather than divine inspiration, managed to plant magnetic mines along the battlecruiser's hull before retreating. Across the battle space, similar scenes played out as human crews implemented strategies that violated every principle of conventional warfare. They used civilian shipping lanes as cover, coordinated with Earth-based civilian networks for intelligence gathering, and employed tactics that prioritized the protection of their home world over the destruction of enemy forces. The result was chaos that favored the smaller, more adaptable human force. Enemy commanders, accustomed to fighting opponents guided by predictable divine oversight, found themselves facing tactics that defied analysis. How do you counter an enemy that treats every civilian as a potential intelligence asset? How do you predict the movements of ships whose captains coordinate through social networks rather than military channels? In the Galactic War Council's Obsidian Amphitheater, the assembled war gods watched the battle with growing alarm. The massive invasion fleet, guided by their combined divine wisdom, was being systematically dismantled by a smaller force that operated according to principles none of them understood. "This is impossible," rumbled Thekmer, his 6 arms gesturing frantically at the tactical displays. "Human forces are outmaneuvering our most experienced commanders. They're achieving tactical coordination without any divine guidance whatsoever." Vex, the war god who had been assigned to replace Ares, writhed with frustration as his attempts to guide the Allied fleet were consistently countered by human tactics that prioritized protection over destruction. They fight not to win, but to preserve. Every engagement is designed to minimize casualties while achieving strategic objectives. It's inefficient, but it's also unpredictable. "Then guide our forces to counter their tactics," hissed Skatara. Her serpentine form coiled with tension. "I cannot," Vex admitted, his voice carrying the sound of cosmic defeat. "Their tactics emerge from their nature, not from strategic doctrine. They fight as they live, with compassion, ingenuity, and an absolute refusal to abandon their principles." The admission sent shockwaves through the assembled deities. A species that could develop effective military tactics organically, without divine guidance, represented something unprecedented in galactic history. It suggested that the entire system of cosmic warfare oversight might be obsolete. From his exile, Ares felt the dimensional barriers weakening as the War Council's confidence in their judgment cracked. The cosmic forces that had stripped him of his divine mandate were beginning to doubt their decision. He could sense the individual prayers of human commanders across the battle space, not requesting divine guidance, but simply asking for the strength to do what was right. The turning point came when Admiral Webb made a decision that would echo through galactic history. Instead of trying to destroy the invasion fleet, she ordered her forces to disable enemy vessels and rescue their crews. Human ships, already moving in patterns that minimized casualties, began targeting enemy life support systems and escape pods rather than weapons and engines. "Admiral," Commander Park said, her voice uncertain as she watched human vessels moving to rescue stranded enemy personnel. "We're saving the lives of soldiers who came here to exterminate us." "Yes," Webb replied, her voice carrying the quiet authority of someone who had found absolute certainty in impossible circumstances. "We're saving them because that's who we are. We don't become monsters to fight monsters. We remain human." The effect on the enemy fleet was immediate and devastating. Crews who had been prepared to fight to the death found themselves being rescued by the very people they had come to destroy. Soldiers who had been taught that humanity was a dangerous aberration discovered that human medics would risk their lives to save wounded enemies. The invasion fleet's morale began to collapse. How do you maintain fighting spirit against an enemy that treats your wounded better than your own commanders? How do you justify genocide against a species that saves your life when you're helpless in space? Individual ships began to withdraw from the battle, not retreating in defeat, but simply unable to continue fighting an enemy that consistently chose mercy over victory. The massive invasion fleet, designed to demonstrate the superiority of divine military guidance, was being defeated by humanity's refusal to abandon their compassion, in the cosmic void of his exile, Ares felt the dimensional barriers crumbling entirely. The Galactic War Council's certainty in their decision was collapsing, and with it, the cosmic forces that had banished him from his divine role. The war god who had been dismissed for being too soft was about to be vindicated in the most spectacular way possible. The final phase of the battle was beginning, and it would prove that humanity's greatest strength had never been their weapons or their tactics. It was their absolute refusal to become anything less than human, even in the face of annihilation. The moment of ultimate vindication came when the Centaurian battlecruiser Dominator, flagship of the invasion fleet, suffered a catastrophic life support failure. The massive vessel, containing over 12,000 crew members, began venting atmosphere through breaches caused by human magnetic mines that had been carefully placed to disable rather than destroy. Admiral Sarah Webb watched the tactical display as the enemy flagship's distress signals filled the communication channels. Her own fleet was scattered across the battle space, many ships damaged, all of them running low on ammunition and supplies. The logical tactical decision was clear: allow the enemy flagship to die in space, eliminating the invasion fleet's command structure and ensuring human victory. Instead, she did something that shocked both the enemy commanders and the watching war gods. All ships, emergency rescue protocol, she broadcast on all frequencies, human and alien alike. The Dominator is in distress. All vessels capable of life support operations are to render immediate assistance. The response was immediate and unprecedented. Human destroyers, their own hulls breached and systems failing, moved to dock with the dying battlecruiser. Medical teams that had been treating human wounded began preparing to receive alien casualties. Supply ships diverted life support equipment to the very vessel that had been directing humanity's extinction. Captain Jack Morrison, commanding the heavy cruiser Indomitable, was the first to dock with the failing battlecruiser. His crew, working with desperate efficiency, began evacuating enemy personnel even as the Dominator's structure groaned under the stress of catastrophic decompression. Incoming wounded, called Chief Medical Officer Kate Reynolds as alien stretchers began arriving in the Indomitable's medical bay. I need all available personnel for emergency treatment. The scene that followed would be recorded in the annals of galactic history. Human medics, trained to treat their own species, worked frantically to save the lives of soldiers who had come to destroy them. Language barriers dissolved as medical necessity transcended cultural differences. Humans and aliens worked side by side, united by the simple principle that life was worth saving. In the Galactic War Council's obsidian amphitheater, the assembled war gods watched in stunned silence as their carefully planned demonstration of divine military superiority collapsed into something unprecedented. The invasion fleet, guided by their combined wisdom and equipped with the most advanced weapons in the galaxy, was being defeated by an enemy that treated warfare as a form of humanitarian crisis management. Thicker's 6 arms trembled as he watched human vessels rescue crews from ships that had been trying to annihilate them minutes before. "This is not war," he said, his voice carrying the sound of fundamental certainty cracking. "This is something else entirely. Vex, the war god who had been assigned to replace Ares, was undergoing his own crisis of understanding. His divine essence, shaped by eons of conventional warfare, could not comprehend tactics that prioritized enemy survival over tactical advantage. "They are winning by refusing to fight," he said, his shadow flame form flickering with confusion. "They achieve victory through mercy." The dimensional barriers that had held Ares in exile finally shattered completely. The war god who had been dismissed for being too soft materialized in the War Council's chamber, his bronze armor gleaming with divine authority restored. But something had changed in his cosmic essence during his exile. He no longer sought their approval or recognition. "You wanted to see what happened when humanity fought without divine guidance," Ares said, his voice carrying the quiet pride of vindication. "You believed their compassion was weakness. You thought their principles were limitations. You were wrong." The tactical displays throughout the chamber showed the final phase of the battle. The invasion fleet, demoralized by humanity's refusal to treat them as enemies worthy of hatred, was surrendering in waves. Not defeat through superior firepower, but capitulation through moral exhaustion. How do you continue fighting people who save your life when you're helpless? Admiral Webb's voice echoed through the communication channels as she broadcast to the entire invasion fleet. This is Admiral Sarah Webb of the Earth Defense Fleet. We offer unconditional medical assistance to all vessels in need. We will treat your wounded, repair your ships, and provide safe passage home. We ask only that you carry a message to your worlds. Humanity wants peace, not conquest. We want to build, not destroy. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Ship after ship began broadcasting surrender codes, their crews too amazed and ashamed to continue fighting. The massive invasion fleet, assembled to demonstrate the superiority of divine military guidance, was laying down its weapons before an enemy that had consistently chosen mercy over victory. In the War Council's chamber, Sketara Serpentine form coiled with frustrated confusion. They should have been exterminated, she hissed. A species that operates without divine guidance threatens the cosmic order. No, Ares replied, his voice carrying the authority of absolute certainty. They represent the cosmic order's next evolution. They've proven that true strength comes not from divine guidance, but from the courage to remain compassionate in the coven face of absolute horror. The war god turned to address the assembled deities directly. You can strip away my divine mandate. You can replace me with entities that embrace brutality over mercy. But you cannot change what humanity has become. They have evolved beyond the need for war gods entirely. The statement hung in the cosmic atmosphere like a death sentence for the old order. Throughout the galaxy, other species were watching humanity's victory with growing amazement. If one species could function militarily without divine oversight, what did that mean for the entire system of cosmic warfare? On Earth, Admiral Webb was concluding the most unusual victory in galactic history. Her fleet had defeated a force 8 times its size without a single act of deliberate cruelty. Enemy wounded were being treated in human medical facilities. Enemy ships were being repaired in human shipyards. Enemy commanders were being offered safe passage home with the simple request that they share the truth of what they had witnessed. The final vindication came when the Galactic War Council formally recalled their invasion fleet and issued an unprecedented apology to humanity. The species that had been marked for extinction was instead recognized as the galaxy's newest sovereign. Power, with the right to govern their own military doctrine without divine interference. Ares received a formal invitation to resume his role as humanity's war god, complete with expanded divine authority and the Council's public acknowledgement that they had been wrong to dismiss him. The war god who had been exiled for being too soft was now hailed as the wisdom behind humanity's revolutionary approach to warfare. His response surprised everyone. I thank the Council for their recognition, Ares said, his voice carrying across dimensions to every human commander in the galaxy. But I must respectfully decline. My species has proven they no longer need a war god. They have learned to wage war without losing their humanity, to achieve victory without sacrificing their compassion. They have become everything I always hoped to teach them. The war god who had guided humanity through centuries of conflict chose to step aside, allowing his species to chart their own course through the galaxy. It was the final act of divine guidance, the wisdom to know when guidance was no longer needed. Humanity had proven that their greatest strength was not their weapons, their tactics, or their divine patron. It was their absolute refusal to become anything less than human, even in the face of cosmic annihilation. They had dismissed their mighty god of war for being too soft, and in doing so, had discovered that their compassion was the hardest weapon of all. The galaxy would never be the same, and neither would the definition of victory.